Lovely. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. So this is pioneering then in a way, a presentation that you've never sort of seen before. So right, let's start from the top. So I'm Tracy, and this is Hedgehog Health Prestatyn, and I started it probably just over 4 years ago, really, September 2016. But going back even further, when I was young, when I was 7, I moved to live on a farm. So we looked after all sorts of different animals. We saw them coming into the world and going out of the world. And then when I was 18, I went to Glenclwyd and I trained to be a nurse. And I was a nurse for 30 odd years, looking after the elderly mainly, which I absolutely loved doing. But sadly, I had to retire because I've got arthritis. But how does that link in with hedgehogs, you're going to say? Well, when we first moved here in Prestatyn 30 odd years ago, I was clearing some of my garden, put some bags of rubbish at the end of the garden. They were there for quite a few weeks. And then one day I heard this squeaking coming from one of the bags. So being brought up on a farm, I thought maybe it's rats. I wasn't bothered. I thought, go and have a look. Had a look in this bag. And there was this nest of hoglets. They were only a few days old. They've got little white spikes on them. No sign of mum. My mum should have been with them, obviously. It was the daytime. So I covered them up really quickly, left them for a couple of hours. Still no sign of mum. They were going really cold and squeaking quite a lot. So I took them in, put them in a box in the airing cupboard, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I phoned the RSPCA. They came and took them away. So that was 32 years ago that we've lived here now. I didn't see hedgehogs for a long, long time after that. Had an elderly lady that lived next door. There was an orchard, there was open fencing, and obviously over the years things have changed an awful lot. Sadly, the lady died, and the trees were flattened, and the gravel was put down, and the solid walls went up. And I'm sure all of you will have seen how things have changed over the years. When I was coming in the garden one evening, about 7 o'clock, there was a hedgehog underneath the bird feeder one evening. So that reignited my passion. I thought that there was the hedgehog still around. So I started putting food out and making nests for them. And then people heard that I liked hedgehogs. And they were finding poorly hedgehogs out in the daytime. Well, they shouldn't be out in the day. Obviously, they're nocturnal. So they were bringing me these hedgehogs. And I thought, yes, I can make them better, no problem. So they bring me the poorly hedgehogs. And used to be a nurse, didn't I? So I used to be on a farm. So I thought, yeah, I can make this hedgehog better, no problem. Gave it a bit of sugar water and warmed it up. Took it to the vet, and the vet gave it an injection, and I brought it home. Next morning it was dead. So I thought, that's not very good. A week later, somebody else brought me a hedgehog, did similar things, tried a little bit harder then, again took it to the vet, and he was pretty sure that he knew what to treat it with. And again, I took it home, same thing happened again, that one died. So I thought, this is not going to be as easy as I thought it was, and I must try harder. So I registered with the British Hedgehog Preservation Society as a hedgehog carer. And through them, I went to the Bell Wildlife Hospital, which is down in Gloucester, and I did a hedgehog course. So September 2016, I did just a basic hedgehog care course. Sounds very grand. It was only for one day, but I learned so much on that day. Still got me? Yeah. Learned so much on that day. I came back and turned my shed into a mini hedgehog hospital, if you like. Let's see the booklet that we've got. Too bright. Yeah, turned my shed into a mini hedgehog hospital. I got some cages, some heat pads, and then of course I wanted to tell people what I was doing, because lots of people don't know they've got hedgehogs visiting. Obviously they're a nocturnal animal, so they might travel through your garden, because they'll go about a mile each night through different gardens looking for food. So I needed to tell my neighbours that there were hedgehogs around. So I made up some information packs, and I made up a contact card. My contact card, which I took around the neighbourhood. 40 different packs I made and took took them around the neighbours and told them that if they did find a hedgehog out in the daytime or a poorly hedgehog, they could bring them to me and hopefully I could help. So from then, I think the first year that I was looking after them, we looked after just 8 over the winter time. Last winter we looked after 86 hedgehogs, so you can see that in the last 4-5 years things have spiraled somewhat. And I don't think that's particularly because the hedgehogs are increasing in numbers. In fact, it's more the other way. We know from reports and studies that hedgehogs are declining terribly. When I go to talk to schools and to the kiddies, I tell them that, you know, hedgehogs have been around since the time of the dinosaurs, and now there's only about 500,000 hedgehogs left in this country. And if we don't look after them, their habitat, their food, and keep them as safe as we possibly can, then, you know, their children might not even see a hedgehog at all, and that is terribly, terribly sad to think of. At the moment, we've only got 8. We've got 17 hedgehogs here, and we've got another 3 at foster care. So that's only 20 hedgehogs as opposed to last year, as I say, when we had 80 plus. Part of that is to do with the climate change. We've been able to release hedgehogs later on in the year than we did last time. So I'm just going to take you a little tour around, and then we'll talk again in a minute. So I'm going to take the camera off Sandy. We've got a visitor who thinks she should have some food. Right. So this is my garden. So Hedgehog Help is run from my garden. It's not ideal, but it's on hand because it's 24/7 vocation, if you like. Get hedgehogs coming to me anytime, any day, and then any numbers. So this is one of my sheds. This tends to be where they come when they're a bit better and they're not having so much treatment. These ones in here, there's none of them on a heat pad at the moment. We've just taken the fly netting off today. They've normally got a net over them, as I say, just to keep the flies off the hedgehogs and off their food. So these are mostly in zoo zones. Some of them are in cages, and we've got 9 of them in here at the moment. We do put a heater on at night time just as a frost guard, really, because the idea of having the hedgehogs is that we keep them awake, we keep them fed, so that they'll put on weight, ready for release in the springtime. So at the moment, we're also having to use the greenhouse. So there's just 4 hedgehogs in there. It's also my laundry room. You know, you call it whatever you want to call it, basically. And down the bottom of the garden, you can see there's work in progress. Here we've got it's our 16-foot. We're going to have a new build here. It's been ordered in August, and it should be coming on the 5th of January. So that's very exciting. We'll fit a lot more hedgehogs in here. It wasn't my plan A. This is plan B. We were hoping to have a hedgehog hospital as such on a bigger, grander scale, but of course COVID has put paid to that, really. You just realise how much you can cope with, obviously, if you can't have your volunteers, if you can't do your fundraising. And as I say, I really needed something on site that I could get to straight away. So this is the plan B. So we're going to have what they call like a garden office building here. It's going to be 16 foot. Didn't want to get rid of my apple tree, so it's made to fit round my apple tree. So all these boxes here, these are the hedgehog boxes that some lovely people make for us. We've got Men's Shed in Prestatyn, there's the gentleman in Broughton, there's a 86-year-old chappie in Ruthin that also makes hedgehog boxes for us, and I'll explain a bit more about those in a minute. So this is where the hedgehogs come into when they first come to us. Right, so this is our main shed. So when the hedgehogs come in, I'll get a phone call, or somebody might just turn up and they'll say, found a hedgehog out in the daytime, or they might have found it down the drain. They get stuck in football netting, attacked by dogs, strimmer injuries, all sorts of things. They get into terrible trouble. So the hedgehogs will come in. The first thing that we'll do is we'll pop them on the scales, make a record of their weight. Then we'll give them a name. That's not because they're ever going to be a pet. We have to remember that they're wild animals. So we don't talk to them. We're as quiet as we possibly can, and we handle them as little as possible. The only reason I'm talking in the shed here today is because I'm doing this presentation. So normally we're very, very quiet. So this hedgehog that's just come in, I will, as I say, pop it on the scales, give it a name, and we'll have a good look at it. Make sure it's got all 4 legs, because they do get trapped in things. They do lose limbs. Check its eyes, check its ears, nose, have a look at its teeth. A lot of hedgehogs, when they come in, they will, if it's the summertime, they'll get flies laying eggs on them, and they'll quickly turn into maggots, which will go for every orifice. So they'll go in their ears and their eyes and the nose. So it's particularly important that if people find a hedgehog in the daytime, they'll do something about it straight away. So yeah, check it over, look for any wounds. As I say, they get strimmer injuries, they'll get attacked by dogs. See if it's, you can see if they've got diarrhea or anything like that as well. So then what we do is we pop it in the incubator, or the brooder, whatever you want to call it, because any wild animal that's poorly and stressed, it will be cold and feeling pretty miserable. So before we do anything else at all, we have to make sure that hedgehog is warmed up. So we'll probably give it an hour or so to warm up. Sounds like I'm putting it in the microwave, doesn't it? So we'll warm the hedgehog up. Once it's warmed, it has to have some fluids. So you can't give a hedgehog fluids orally, because what do they do when they're frightened? They curl up in a ball. We've got our cat that's just wanting to get in on the action. Right, just give the camera to Sandy now. Right, so a hedgehog that's frightened, it will curl up in a ball. So there's no way that I can give it things orally. If I try to, it's not going to get the right amount. So all the medications that the hedgehog have, they're given by injection. So we will just in the back of the hedgehog, under the skin, draw back, and then we would give it some fluid. I'm not going to squirt it in because I wet my hedgehog. So they'll have 10, 20, maybe 30 mils of Hartmann's solution, and that's just to start rehydrating them and give them some calories. Once we've done that, they'll go back in the incubator to warm up again. During which time we'll also give them, we'll put some rehydration fluids in for them. That'll also have some glucose and some calories in. We won't tend to give them some food. The main thing is for them to be hydrated first. Sorry, just letting it get out. You shouldn't work. I can't stop animals. We're back. Right. So we'll then wait for the hedgehog to do a poo, because it's very important to look at that poo under the microscope. All hedgehogs will have internal parasites, so they'll have some roundworm, and they may well have lungworm. They'll pick them up naturally from the worms and the slugs and things that they eat out in the wild. If they're a big fat healthy hedgehog, which this one now is, the big fat healthy hedgehog, they will cope with those internal parasites. But if anything tips the balance, if they become unwell for any reason, or they're underweight, they're not able to find their food, then that roundworm and lungworm and possibly fluke as well will overcome them. And just by looking at a hedgehog, you can't tell what is wrong with it or how poorly it is. A lot of the time people will say, oh, it's a hedgehog out in the day, I've popped it in a box, but now it's eating and it's trying to climb out the box, you know, and they think that because it's doing those things, there's actually not much wrong with it. But it's a wild animal, it's in its instinct not to show weakness and to try and escape. So I'll always say, you know, I need to check it over, bring it to me. So what we'll do is, I say, look at the poo under the microscope, and just as a rough guideline, the sorts of things that we're looking for, those are adult fluke. Just the adult round worm, that's fine. Adult round worm with the eggs in it. This is coccidia, that's something else that they get. The lungworm larvae are particularly easy to find because they wriggle, so they're the first ones that you normally see. So lungworm, roundworm, fluke are the three main things. But as well as that, they'll have infections, and they, as I say, they can be extremely poorly, even though to the untrained eye, such they'll look as though they're okay. So once we know what's wrong with that hedgehog, it will have its course of injections or spot-on medication, whatever's needed. It takes 3 weeks to treat them, and in that time we'll be weighing them every day, and hopefully they'll be putting on weight. If there's any variation, then we'll perhaps need to introduce some antibiotics. I've got an extremely good vet. I couldn't do all this without her support, so that is amazing. So yeah, medications are tweaked according to how the hedgehog is responding to treatment. And sometimes if the course of 3-week medications doesn't work, because we'll still be checking the poo under the microscope, if they've still got signs of parasites, then they might need a further treatment as well. So after that length of time, they should be ready to go. So depending on the time of the year, you know, if it's the summer and they've had all the treatment and they're putting on weight, then we'll get them back out to the wild. So I'll just take you back out. Try not to let the cat back in. So every single one of our hedgehogs that goes out, we provide with a nest box. It's not because they're going to be kept as pets or anything, but some of the hedgehogs that we will have looked after might have been in our care for, you know, months, if it's over the winter time, and it's always important that they've got you know, a nest. So we collect leaves, and we've got some hay. This actually comes, the hay is scythed actually from a gentleman that scythes the cemeteries. So he bales it up for us, and we've got that, which is perfect for the hedgehogs. And as I say, the boxes are made by the men's shed, or this one was actually made by the Woodland Skills Centre, so they're very sturdy. And then we make sure that wherever they're going, that the people are putting food out for them, because majority of the hedgehogs do go into people's gardens. So they should already have hedgehogs visiting, and so they should already be putting water down, some dry cat food, and some wet cat food. We tend to use the cat food in jelly rather than the gravy. And it doesn't matter what flavour it is. They used to say not to give fish flavours, but that's not the case. They can have any flavours whatsoever. I think maybe it stems back from when hedgehogs, maybe years ago, when the fish food had some little bones in it, so perhaps that was the problem. But no, they'll eat any flavour. Some of ours in care will only eat the dry food, and some will only eat the wet food. and others eat both. So it's a pick and mix, really. Just while I'm out here in the rain, a little bit about our hedgehog group. We actually also do litter picks quite often. So keep Wales tidy. I'm a hedgehog, not a hedgehog. I'm a litter champion for Keep Wales Tidy, and so we've got the equipment and we go out as a group when we're allowed, and we do litter picks because hedgehogs do get stuck in litter. We've had them wrapped up in elastic bands, football netting, badminton netting, crisp packets. They get stuck in all sorts of weird and wonderful things. Something else we do is we do hedge planting. So these are actually my little tree saplings at the moment from last year. Obviously, they're called hedgehogs. They like to travel between gardens, and hedgerows are the best sort of highways for them. Right, I'll just pass the camera back over to Sandy. I'm going to get a hedgehog out to show you. She came into us on the 23rd of the 11th. She was only 276 grams. So this time of the year, hedgehogs need to be about 650 grams to survive the winter time. So she's obviously too small. But what we also find is majority of the hedgehogs coming in also have the internal parasites, and she was a poorly one as well. So she's just about finished her treatment. She's doing a lot better now. We use these little sleeping bags just to make them feel secure. Now I'm not wearing gloves, and I'll just explain why. It's my choice not to wear gloves. I like to feel whether the hedgehog's warm, whether it's wet. It's just to get a feel for it, really. But hedgehogs do carry a lot of zoonotic diseases, so you can get roundworm. No, you can't get roundworm. You can get ringworm. You can get ringworm from hedgehogs, as well as infections from their spikes. So it's not advisable to handle them without gloves. It's just, as I say, just my choice. So as you can see, when hedgehogs are frightened, they curl up in a ball. Now she's a lovely shape. She's lovely and round, like a Christmas pudding. When the hedgehogs are poorly and they come to us, they're very thin at the back, like a V shape, like a rugby ball almost. So if you've got a hedgehog that you're not quite sure if it's healthy or not, if you can get it to curl up in a ball, that's just quite a good indication, really. So they have about 7,000 spikes. I don't know who counted them, but they reckon that an adult hedgehog has 7,000 spikes. To get them to uncurl, if you just turn them on their front, just gently stroke their back whilst getting your fingers under their chin. Normally, a bit of patience. Get them to unroll. So then you can have a good look underneath. See how nice and fluffy almost she is underneath. So this is the girl. If it was a boy, the winky would be a bit further up, sort of where your tummy button is. So they have a little tail. You can see her tail down there. The claws on their feet so they can forage. And they have this muscle that goes around the outside, which is the orbicularis muscle, which is like a purse string, which helps them to curl up in the ball. So this is one of this year's youngsters, obviously. Should have been earlier on this year. So at the moment she's 450 grams. So she's still a couple of 100 grams light for the winter time. So she'll be staying with us for longer yet, possibly till the spring, but it all depends on the the temperatures and the forecast really. See her lovely wet. She's got a lovely wet nose. We've got a very good sense of smell. She has got little eyes in there, though she's not opening them for us. And their ears, they have a very good sense of hearing and a very good sense of smell. They don't have to see very well because obviously they're out at night time, so they use their other senses. So when the hedgehogs, they're solitary animals, so they won't normally live with other hedgehogs. They just get together for nuptials, as you like. So the male and the female hedgehog, you might, if you've got them in your garden, you might hear courtship going on. The male hedgehog will circle the female hedgehog, and she'll probably do a lot of huffing and puffing and telling him where to go. They'll mate, and at 35 days roughly, she will give birth to live hoglets. So they're pink like my skin when they're born, and she'll have on average about 5 to 7 hoglets. And their eyes and their ears will be sealed closed until they're about 3 weeks old. Their little prickles start to come through within a few hours of being born, and they will suckle the hedgehog milk off the mum. So she's got 10 teats actually. Not that you can see them there because she's nice and hairy, but yeah, she'll suckle the hoglets, and when they're 3 weeks old, she'll start to take them round the garden and show them what's good to eat and what's not good to eat. And then when they're about 8 weeks, they'll leave the mum and they'll actually go and be solitary animals and make their own nests. So this time of the year, as I say, it's autumn. So lots of people think that, you know, hedgehogs in October maybe they'll go off to hibernate and you won't see them till the spring. But climate change is having a huge impact on our hedgehogs. They don't know what to do basically. It's very, very mild in comparison to what it was years ago. Very wet. So they are still out and about. Some years now they're not even hibernating at all. So we try and encourage people to always put food out. So we've got, if you can put some dry cat food. This is Tesco kitten biscuits, and they absolutely love it, and it's very good for them. I should be on commission with Tesco, I think, for promoting their foods, but it is the one that we found that they eat the most. So if people can make sure that they have water down and a dish of cat food, then that would be amazing. Lots say, oh, I can't possibly put cat food out because I'll be feeding all the cats in the neighbourhood. But there are lots of ideas on the internet how to make feeding stations. They're very, very simple to make a cat deterrent. Hedgehogs can get through quite small gaps, and if you sort of make a chicane with the bricks, then it tends to be quite successful to be just the hedgehogs and not the cats. And also in this area we have trouble with seagulls, so it keeps the seagulls out. So as I say, climate change is a big problem for them. And what do hedgehogs eat? Lots of people think that hedgehogs just eat slugs and snails. In fact, quite often I'll get a phone call. Tracy, could I have a couple of hedgehogs for my garden to eat the slugs and snails? I'll say no. Firstly, most of the hedgehogs that we have in, we try and get them back to where they came from, particularly with the adults, because they'll know where to find their food, their water, and they will have different nests in different gardens, so they'll know their way around. And I forgot what I was talking about. Lost my track. Doesn't matter. Sandy's no help to me. Food. Yeah, that's right.
Releasing.
Food. Lots of people think that they eat slugs and snails, but they do actually like a variety of things. They like to eat caterpillars, bugs, beetles, worms, spiders, centipedes, wood lice, you name it. They like a nice variety. So it's not just slugs and snails. The slugs and snails, they're the sort of things that carry the internal parasites. So the more of those they eat, the more likely they are to become overburdened with parasites. So if we can offer some dry or wet cat foods, all the best. But I think the ideal thing really is the natural foods for them. So if you've got an open compost in your garden, that is amazing, because obviously there's lots of bugs and beetles and that in there. What bothers me a little bit is we have the green wheelie bins in Denbighshire here for the garden waste. So people will clear their garden or mow their lawn, put everything into the green wheelie bins, and off it goes. And in my mind, basically, that's sterilising your garden, because of the there was insects and there was larvae in that garden waste. Then off it goes to wherever, and I'm not quite sure what to do with it. But the best thing to do is to put your garden rubbish or your cuttings and that just in the corner of a garden somewhere, and it will not only encourage the mini beasts, but it'll be great buffet for the hedgehogs, and somewhere possibly for them to nest as well. So be careful when you're gardening, obviously. They do like to go in compost areas and overgrown areas. As I say, strimmer injuries are a really big problem for our hedgehogs. We've had quite a few that have had basically the tops of their heads scalped. But luckily, they do heal really quite well, so long as they've got the right conditions. So, we make sure they're well fed and they've got antibiotics and whatever topical medications are needed. And they are really tough creatures. We've seen a lot of nasty injuries that have recovered. Hedgehogs that come into us that have got a front leg missing, they can't be returned back to the wild, because obviously they use their front legs to forage for food. So sadly they need to be put to sleep. If they have a back leg missing, then it's not quite so bad. They can get around quite well on 3 legs, and we have released hedgehogs without a back leg back into the wild. One thing that we started doing this year when we released the hedgehogs is we started tagging them. We wanted to do microchipping, but that has to be done by a vet. So we came up with another option, which we found that a few other rescues were doing. And so we've got these plastic tags, and they've got HHP for Hedgehog Help Prestatyn, and they're all individually numbered. So when the hedgehogs are being released, with a little bit of super glue, we put these over one of the spikes. One there, one there. When they're on the hedgehogs, you can't actually see them because they go right down to their skin. So we pop the blue ones on the boys and the red ones on the girls, and we keep a record. And so if those hedgehogs are found again, which has happened before now, we'll know which hedgehog it is, roughly how old it is, what treatment it's had in the past, and how far it's travelled. So that's worked out quite well, really. It's been very useful. Just going back to food, lots of people think that they're treating the hedgehogs by putting out raisins or mealworms, nuts, or even I've heard of digestive biscuits, all sorts of things that have been put out as treats. But anything that's sweet, obviously the hedgehogs can't clean their teeth like we can, so they get rotten teeth very, very easily. As soon as that tooth is rotten, it goes to a tooth abscess, it goes to the bone. Hedgehog can't eat, it's in terrible pain, and it has a horrible death. And rotten teeth tends to be the main problem for the demise of an older hedgehog, really. When an older hedgehog comes in, it tends to, as I say, it's got plaque on its teeth, or teeth missing. They've lost the pigment on the bottom of their feet, they're quite pinky. and they tend to be more of a gingery colour spikes as well. So the reason why we say to people not to give the mealworms and the sunflower hearts and the peanuts is that they're very high in phosphorus, and it actually takes the calcium out of the hedgehog's bones. So it gives them metabolic bone disease, which is like osteoporosis, if you like. And we have had hedgehogs in that couldn't actually use their limbs. They were walking on their elbows as such, dragging themselves along on their chin because their bones had not formed right. It tends to happen more in the juvenile hedgehogs that are just developing, because obviously they need the calcium more. And so please, I do ask people not to put anything different out for hedgehogs. Ideally, obviously, they're natural foods. And to supplement that, then we'll put out the dry or the wet and the wet cat foods. But they don't need anything else at all. One thing that concerns me is that the fact that the pet food industry doesn't seem to be very well regulated. So a lot of these hedgehog foods that you see advertised, they're full of mealworms, they're full of banana chips and raisins and all the sunflower hearts and peanuts, the things that are bad for hedgehogs. And just because it's got hedgehog food on it and it sounds nice to us, then obviously it's just drawing people in really into the fact that they think that that's good for the hedgehogs. But it's not. And if they do have that metabolic bone disease, then there's no recovery from it and they are put to sleep. So the reason for the demise of the hedgehog, as they say, they've gone down from millions and millions to less than 500,000 probably. And they're not the easiest mammal, obviously, to track, monitor and record. But I can definitely see in just the few years that I've been doing it that numbers have declined terribly. And the hedgehogs that are coming into me are particularly poorly as well, lots of ill health. Sandy's just reminded me, no milk. Yeah. Years ago, people used to put bread and milk out. Hedgehogs are lactose intolerant, so milk will give them diarrhea. So, yeah, just plain water and the dry or the wet cat foods. So hedgehogs are declining for many, many, many reasons. From A to Z, I could talk about it all week probably. But the main sort of reasons are the lack of access through gardens. People are taking away the hedges and putting up the fences. So the hedgehogs, where they used to travel through gardens, they can't get through that fence. So they're going up the garden path and under the garden gate, crossing over the road to get to somewhere where there's a pond where they can have a drink. So every time they're crossing over the road, they're at risk of getting run over. And, obviously we have all pretty much seen dead hedgehogs on the road. So they're having to travel a lot further to find gardens that have got what they need. So they need obviously a mate. They need to meet up with male and female hedgehogs. As I say, they'll have 4 or 5 different nests in different gardens. That helps to keep the parasites down. So if they've got ticks, ticks or fleas, if they stay in the same nest for too long, then those will increase. So that's why they rotate the nest that they sleep in. Just while we're talking about fleas, hedgehogs have hedgehog-specific fleas. And I've looked after hundreds and hundreds of hedgehogs, and I can honestly say that only 6 of those had fleas. So it's old wives' tale, I suppose, if you like, that all hedgehogs have fleas. If they do have fleas, as I say, it tends to be that they've stayed in that one nest for too long, and that's because they're poorly. And what we don't want is people taking them in and putting flea powders or sprays and that all over them, because they're very, very sensitive to medications, and a lot of the on the shelf things are toxic and they will actually kill them. Frontline is particularly toxic to hedgehogs, so please don't ever be tempted to put anything on them or spray them. Yes, they will have ticks. About half a dozen ticks isn't a big problem. If they've got more than that, if you see them all over their face, all over their body, then again that tends to mean that they're poorly. So they do need to go to a rescue or a vet and be treated. and take them off, obviously, but find the underlying cause of why that hedgehog's poorly as well. Right, I'm going to have a break. Mark, do you want to see if there's any questions?